I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read in the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is a safety warning for those who are new to our webcast. I sometimes get lost in the scuffle, so just be aware of that. This is a warning, safety warning for those new who may not be aware that I am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. It is also true that I am theologically conservative. I want to know and believe what is true, and I'm willing to challenge my beliefs. So, for those viewers who have a fear of hearing an idea that may lead to actually thinking and testing their beliefs, this is a trigger warning. This is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged. Today is December 1. Imagine that, Ron. December 1. We are nearly through the year 2020. This is broadcast number 217, and returning to join us on today's webcast is the author of The Game of Gods, Carl Teichrib. Today, we will be looking at culture's magical re-enchantment. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and a senior researcher, co-host, and maybe re-volunteering again, COVID-19 tracker is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
What do you want to call me, like intermittent COVID-19 tracker? I don't know.
Intermittent and irrelevant, maybe. I don't know.
Probably. So, welcome, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for today's webcast include Carbona Grande Resorts and Spas, the investment opportunity of the new climate world order, and World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet. And to ensure continued access to this program, if you like it, or if you don't and you want to annoy somebody with it, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. But before we go any further, our legal disclaimer, which we are now making a permanent part of this webcast. Our legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Carl Teichrib today, I think, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. This is from our law firm at Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. So we know it's official. If your lawyer signs off on it, that is all you really need.
That is definitely all, or all you need is love. That could be
all you need is law.
Our age is showing. All right, we have Carl Teichrib, who's going to. He actually enjoys our satire to some degree, I think, and joins in from time to time.
Within reason.
Well, gentlemen, I was just going to say, as Ron, as you were going through that legal disclaimer, the thought hit me. Can I make a smart remark?
Uh,
of course, and it's covered, and we don't have to even like it.
Yes. But the reverse applies. We are not responsible for your smart remarks, and we have no connection to yours. You have no connection to ours. We're totally disconnected.
Right. So, we could just say that was his own smart remarks, so get mad at him. We don't really care. And,
yeah.
And for those who would like to know, we're actually talking about portions of a chapter in your book. The book looks like this. Let me see if I can get right here. We go. Share. Sonny and share. Game of Gods, which is a sort of a tome almost. It's 570 some pages, right?
Yeah, it's a big book.
It's a big book. You got to like reading for sure.
Does it have pictures? Does it have pictures?
No pictures. Only on the cover. Just the Game of Gods. New age pictures. But it is an important book, I think. And we've talked about this a few times. We're focusing on today on Re-Enchantment. So, Carl, what do you mean when you talk about Re-Enchantment? For those who are joining us for the first time and go, what are you talking about even? What is Re-Enchantment?
What you talking about, Willis?
The subtitle of the book is The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-Enchantment. And I make the argument in the book that we are moving beyond the era of postmodernism, although postmodernism is still wildly in play. That's obvious. Mm-hmm. And we are stepping into
mainstream now. It's mainstream now.
It's mainstream. And we are stepping into a different frame of reference. And it's been around at least since the late 1960s, but is becoming a way of feeling and a way of thinking. And so Re-Enchantment is this. It is the search for meaning, purpose, mystery, wonder. If you go back in some of the intellectual thought of the last 100 years or so, you run into the concept of disenchantment. And Max Weber talked about that. He was a social, intellectual historian and critic. And he was describing the disenchantment of the world and how we have entered an age of materialism, an age of industry, an age of urbanization, and it has stripped away our soul. There's no longer meaning, there's no longer purpose, certainly no longer wonder or mystery. And that is one of the downfalls of modernity, is that it left the soul hungry for something. Now, we rejected Christianity as a culture. In the 1960s, we began to reject materialism or modernity as a worldview. And so we entered the phase of postmodernism, which ultimately is about questioning authority, looking for questions and seeking out questions, but not really embracing answers. Everything is found in the question, but we don't go searching after answers. But that's a vacuum. That itself is a vacuum of sorts. And so something else has to fill it. Re-Enchantment fills it by saying, we find our wonder, our purpose, our meaning in the grand community of all things. We are all interconnected. We're all one. We find our meaning now in the earth. We find our meaning back in nature. We find our meaning in our experiences, and especially in those social feelings that all of a sudden animate the crowd.
As you outlined that, something occurred to me that I hadn't really thought of before. Willow Creek and Saddleback sort of became the image of the corporate church, not unlike the image of modernity, right? Mm-hmm. We're here, we're going to market our product to you in a new and exciting way to bring in unbelievers. We wanted to be comfortable here so we can get to the gospel in a less threatening way. And then when we hit the late 1990s, we saw an exodus from the church of a certain key group of people calling themselves emerging, who are rejecting, guess what? Modernity, the corporatizing of the church, in search of meaning in where? In nature, in the family community, and they came in contact with a little Franciscan priest by the name of Richard Rohr, who said, I will show you the path where all of this happens. He's kind of into re-enchantment, sort of the lightning rod of the Enneagram movement, which is now permeating the church.
Richard Rohr absolutely embodies the concepts of re-enchantment.
Well,
you now are coming into a feeling. It's a feeling. That feeling of experience guides your truth.
Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Well, anyways, so now you talked about disenchantment, and then you talked about re-enchantment. Now, the disenchantment really was a disenchantment, you might say, with reality or perceived reality. Was that what Max Weber was talking about? He wrote about the rise of capitalism and its connections to the Reformation, Protestantism, and the rise of capitalism. If anything, when I think about disenchantment, I think of Marx. Well, of course, the word he would use would be alienation.
Right.
Now, you have if please refresh my memory about what Max Weber said about disenchantment. What did he say?
He looked at disenchantment as a response or a reaction, almost a domino falling, let's call it that. A domino falling when a culture has lost its sense of meaning or purpose because it's no longer connected any longer to mythic, magic, or religious contexts. It is now only dominated by industrial, technical, urbanization, capitalistic frameworks.
So then
the culture is finding itself at a loss of meaning.
The real interesting part of that is that he implicitly acknowledges that we have to find our meaning somewhere beyond the world of our five senses,
Right.
But by choosing the word enchantment, he seems to also be implying that whatever we choose to go beyond our five senses to look for, it doesn't necessarily have to be real. It just has to be enchanting. It has to be something that motivates us. It's something that we are attracted to. So I think he might be trying to avoid commentary on the reality of it. It's real for you, maybe he's kind of anticipating that. So you go into the world of re-enchantment, and you're saying that begins about when?
Realistically, in terms of today's culture, the late 1960s. And if you want to really frame it within a specific event, April 22nd, 1970, there's no question that was the day when re-enchantment grabbed a hold of America's youth and set ourselves on a trajectory.
Why that day?
That was the first Earth Day. That was when 20 million Americans embraced and celebrated and felt one with the earth.
Yeah, but by that time, the musical Hair had been on Broadway for.
Absolutely.
We were listening to not only were we listening to the Fifth Dimension sing, Age of Aquarius and Let the Sun Shine In, but the Cowsills, that little family group, was singing the song Hair from the same rock musical.
Right.
We had ESP books all over the bookshelves. We had television programs. Really, some of those came along a little later, but yeah.
Well, sure. So you watch
Timothy Leary.
And Carl and I have talked a lot about this privately, as well as at events. We go to the Parliament of World Religions and hang out with the Wiccans and the Buddhists and whoever else will talk to us. And as we look back, what we see is, and Ron and I, you've talked about this a little bit, since around 1825, there's been a march away from the Judeo-Christian worldview. The church has become consistently more marginalized, well-intentioned, I think, fearful of being enculturated, may be the right word, so much so that Machen wrote his book Christianity and Liberalism in 1923, kind of saying, look, you guys might be religious, but you're not Christian, and here's why. And that continued on. Now, fundamentalists tried hard, I think, to hold on to the fundamentals of the faith, but the problem with culture is it is invasive. It just is invasive.
It's like a virus.
It is a virus. And so by the time you get to the 1960s, even though much of the church still held to the essentials of the faith, culture had really pretty much abandoned that. They held on to what I call a Christian hangover. They still did believe in morality, but they had nothing to attach it to.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Without God, the God of the Bible, you have no basis on which you could say anything is right or wrong. It only just is. And now that started then influencing the church, though, by the time we get to the 1990s. So we're 20 years behind culture.
What I was driving at was what you talk about, the shift from disenchantment to re-enchantment sounds an awful lot like another transition that took place about 150 years earlier, the shift from deism to romanticism.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it seems like we have these pendulum shifts in culture. And the reason it went from deism to romanticism was because deism turned into this dry, rationalistic, emotionally arid. It was very difficult to motivate anybody to do anything with deism. And it permeated especially the upper echelons of the culture, the intelligentsia. And so when you look at when you think of who grabbed a hold of romanticism and said, let's turn this into a theological thing, it was Friedrich Schleiermacher, with his lectures to the Christianity's cultured despisers, Right. So he is Charles Hodge, Princeton theologian, actually studied under Schleiermacher and knew that Schleiermacher was out to lunch theologically. But one of the things that really impressed Hodge about Schleiermacher was he would spend all Sunday afternoon at his piano passionately singing these Lutheran hymns. He played the piano and passionately singing these hymns that he'd grown up with as if he believed every single word of them, and it's like but it was really about the emotion. It was about the feeling for Schleiermacher, it was about the feeling of dependence. For everybody else, it's just since Schleiermacher, it's been whatever feeling you want it to be about. That's what your religion is all about. So we had this swing from the intellectual to the emotional. And, during the 19th century, I guess you could argue that it kind of started to go back a little bit because, let's face it, science was enormously successful. The scientific revolution was now beginning to bear so much fruit that I think a lot of people were swept back in the other direction, that science is going to answer everything ultimately. And then evolution comes along. And so you come to I think that's where maybe that disenchantment starts coming back. The Industrial Revolution really, it's elevating our lifestyles, our standards of living. We seem to be able to do things that we never dreamed we would be able to do. And now we're just back in that same place that deism took us to. And so my suggestion is that no matter what philosophical view, metaphysical view, whatever, of the universe that man tries to come up with, based on his best observations at the time, best rationalizations at the time, it will always have something missing that will result in the pendulum. The pendulum will inevitably go back the other way.
That's right.
So here's a question.
Yes.
Unless you want to jump on that real quick, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the importance of April 22nd, 1970, is that it, at that point, grounded in the minds, especially the minds of school children, because it was adopted by the school system, and that's very important. Timothy Leary wasn't. You could listen to the music.
School system.
By the public school system. That day gave the American public school system and the youth of that age a new myth that they could grab a hold of, that they could feel a sense of connection with, and that was oh, we have our purpose and our meaning. It's loyalty to the earth. It's a return to nature. It's a return to earth. And Ron, you're exactly right. It is nothing more than romanticized or romanticism, except now placed within the culture of our era.
And the thing is, like right now, when you talk about Earth Day, and I remember the first Earth Day. Don, you remember the first Earth Day, right?
I do.
I don't know if Carl does, but I remember.
I was a little guy.
You were just a little tyke. I remember what a big
I'm
deal.
still the old guy in the crew here. So.
And I don't know about you, but like all the fashions, the clothing fashions of the early 70s were like greens and browns. You know, in fact, that was already coming. Just look at the very first episode. The very first episodes of the Brady Bunch, and look at their kitchen decor. You had, this kind of rust orange countertop, which was hideous, but everybody loved it back then. The green cabinets, everything was earth tones, right?
Right.
We're going to save the earth. Well, and that's California too. That was kind of like ground zero of the ecology movement. And now it's ground zero of the ecology catastrophe.
Right.
I mean, look at it. It is. We went with emotion. We went with Gaia. We went with Mother Earth. We went with, we can't do it. We have to just let everything happen naturally. And now people are dying because we did that. And forests are probably burning much more out of control than they would otherwise. So I think what we could be seeing, maybe I'd like to think, is a kind of a swing backwards to say, wait a minute, maybe we overdid it just a little bit. Our state is burning out of control. I don't know.
Well, you'd think so. Now, Richard Neal asked the question, do you guys feel the same anguish I feel about modern Christianity? It is like the body of true believers in Jesus is shrinking. I'm sorry, family, for stating my sorrow here in chat. Don't be sorry about stating it here. The answer is maybe it's shrinking, or maybe it's just becoming more apparent how few believers are in our congregations. It's relatively easy to sit inside of a church and feel worshipful until something else comes along that makes you feel more spiritual outside, and it becomes then a new ritual that you're engaging in. What role, if any, does the various pagan deities in our architecture play? You have a whole section in this chapter on just the various deities that are erected or visible in our architecture around the United States, for sure, as well as around the world. But why is that important?
I start off the chapter by taking you to a number of statues and monuments, primarily in the United States. You're right, Don, primarily in the United States, that exemplify some democratic principle. And it's either it's Nike, or it's Athena, it's Diana. It seems that we, in a land filled with church crosses from coast to coast, have in all of our high places, political high places, even economic high places, representations of ancient pagan personalities. And the point that's important with bringing that up in the very beginning of the chapter is the understanding that the myths that those pagan deities embodied were always a connection back to natural processes, always a return back to a spiritualized sense of connection with the cosmic cycles, with nature, with the forest, the rivers, fertility, even human personality traits, victories in war, all the rest. All of them had some type of representation within a spiritualized, paganized personality. So when you take a look at now we're returning to some type of myth. We have April 22nd, 1970 demonstrates that return to a myth. And the return to the myth was now Gaia, Mother Earth, the spirit of the planet. I wanted to be my readers to be able to demonstrate, to see that the concepts of today, this concept of earth worship, really has its roots deep in the mythology of ancient time period. And it's saying the same thing. And ironically, we have these representations all over North America. When you see it, it's like, oh, oh, every city has that. Every place has that.
Right.
I found it very interesting as I began kind of just having my eyes opened with the recognition that the ancient past, the mythologies of that ancient past, still informs the thinking and worldview of today, in that we are emulating the same thought patterns, the same sense of continuity, a cosmic connection between nature, spirituality, and humanity.
So, in the Parliament of World Religions in Salt Lake City, which was, I don't know, 6 years ago or so?
Yeah. Yep. 2015. Yep.
2015. Okay. 5 years ago. A major theme of the conference was Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had a booth where you could write a letter of apology to Mom because we have injured you, Mom. You gave us birth. You brought us into this world. You have cared for us and provided for us, and we have been abusive to you, Mom. We are so terribly sorry.
Well, moms are really good at guilt tripping. I don't think we should, I don't really think we should encourage them this way. It's like all they have to do is look at you sometime, and so by the way, I just put up a comment in our comment section. Sadly, it doesn't go out under my name. It goes out under, depends on, well, it has your face on one of them.
That's fine. That's okay.
But it's a response to Richard Neal, who posted a very, I think, very thoughtful comment that you displayed. He is in anguish about modern Christianity, and I put the title. It's called the title of a YouTube lecture called "The Awakening of 1792 Onward" by J. Edwin Orr. J. Edwin Orr was a professor of church history at Fuller Seminary long back in the day when it was a really good place to go to. And he was a specialist on revivals. And he talks about how the state of the church in the 1790s after the Revolution and just prior to the Second Great Awakening. And it was pretty abysmal. Now, I don't think we should celebrate the fact that, we've been in worse straits than we have before now. I mean, it was really bad. The church was in really bad shape. Churches were sometimes in some cities, there was certain denominations that had been there for generations had just evaporated. So God turned it around. We had the Second Great Awakening. So I actually took a graduate school class. Sadly, it didn't count toward my master's degree because it wasn't in the field of biblical studies, but I took it anyways, and it was called the History and Theology of Revival. And in this class, I learned the church, every time the church went through a major revival, it was because we were in significant straits. It looked, as Dr. Orr says in this lecture, it appeared as if Christianity would vanish from the face of the earth. And he was actually quoting another church historian when he said that. Things looked really bad. Well, they don't look quite that bad right now, but they look pretty bad.
We are moving in that direction, and
oh yeah, we sure are.
So we want to move back to our re-enchantment here. By the way, Mother Earth is a pretty big issue at the Parliament. We're talking about that, and of course, people are concerned. We've gone from ice ages coming in the 1970s to global warming, and everything's going to melt off in the 1990s. Now, since they know something catastrophic is happening and they don't know what it's going to be, they just call it climate change. We used to call it seasons. But one of our sponsors, though, is capitalizing on that.
Well, why not? I mean, come on. When you see images like this, what do you think of? Vacation, fun, relaxation, time away from the family? Well, here are two words you should be thinking. Cha-ching. Because any day now, the Arctic beaches of Canada, Alaska, Greenland, and Northern Europe will all look like this. making them the investment opportunity of a lifetime. Work will soon be starting on our new chain of Carbona Grande resorts and spas. Right now, right while you're thinking about it, get on the phone and contact Oxgore Industries today for a free investment prospectus at 1-800-CLIMATE. Carbona Grande resorts and spas, the investment opportunity of the new climate world order. Hey, I'm ready to book my reservation.
New climate, and that's an important one, because with the what looks like the coming of the new world order under the UN and the economic reset they're trying to pull off next year, a lot of that is tied to climate change. So,
well, I'm looking forward to those palm trees over northern Greenland.
Yeah, for sure.
And and skating on my swimsuit and taking a plunge in the Arctic Ocean when it's so nice and balmy warm.
Well, now Carl makes a statement in his book here, which I find intriguing. However, the New Age movement, with its spiritualized, self-focused human potential and its tendency to feast at a thinly spread spiritual smorgasbord, while profoundly impacting the social landscape with its message of oneness, was incapable of providing a base narrative that impelled global action. Okay, what does all of that mean?
Yeah, can you put that in English, please? Translation. Sure. take it out of Canadian and put it into American.
The New Age movement, and this is an important issue or an important distinction between Re-Enchantment and the New Age. The New Age movement focuses on the self. It was a marketplace-based spiritual alternative experience. And primarily it was about finding your own divinity, recognizing or awakening yourself to your own godhood, because of course humanity, you forgot that you're God or that you're divine. And so the New Age movement certainly had this sense of a higher self as its key component. Re-enchantment says, okay, yeah, that's all part of it. You're keeping that. But now we add the element of we. It's the group. It's all of us in a holistic community of oneness. It's us and the earth. It's us and, in the case of, here's just a poster from the Fairy Human Relations Congress, it's us and the divine entities, the spirits, the sprites, the fairies.
The sprites.
It's, yes, as opposed to the Pepsis, right?
Well, actually, I go back to the day of programming in basic computer language, and you could do these things, create these things called sprites, which moved along the screen. Anyways, okay.
But even as you're talking about that, I remember the goddess movement in certain Presbyterian churches, and we had TV 38 at the time, was in Chicago, was a Christian station. We're interviewing one of the promoters of this, and she was interesting. As I watched her, she said, it isn't about the deity, it is about who gets to name the deity. Whether it's, God or Jerry or Margaret or so the whole goddess worship aspect was the oneness, the inclusiveness, the who gets to do the naming of the deity and the ritual. That's what's important. Is that what you're describing here?
Yes, to a point. Let me give you an example of the difference between Re-Enchantment and the New Age. Again, the New Age ends up becoming this perspective of the self, becoming divine or recognizing or unfolding your divinity. Whereas Re-Enchantment takes on the approach of the we. And in terms of the narrative, that's really important. We haven't touched on that global narrative, which brings about purpose and meaning. So regarding climate change, if you want to go back to where climate change really gets its political footprint, you have to go back to the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. That's where you have the Agenda 21 is framed, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and that is where the Climate Change Convention comes into play. What was happening at the 1992 summit, though, was more than just political leaders getting together. It was more than just the United Nations. It was non-government organizations. It was faith-based groups. The world had gathered. And there were a couple of different side events to the Rio Summit. The NGO community had their own event. There was another event on the side called the Sacred Earth Gathering. It released its vision statement. Let me read it to you, and then I'm going to jump into the 92 Summit as well. Here's a vision statement from the Sacred Earth Gathering at the Rio 92 conference. The crisis is global, and there's your narrative. It's global. It's the Earth. It's Mother. We have to have a framing story. We have to have a grounding. That's it. The crisis is global. We must therefore transform our attitudes and values and adopt a renewed respect for the superior law of divine nature. Individuals and government need to evolve earth ethics with a deeply spiritual orientation, or the earth will be cleansed. We believe that the universe is sacred because all is one. And so we read that, we're going, well, that's as pagan as you get. Yeah. And that was a Sacred Earth Gathering, that component of the Rio Summit. Jump to the political side of the Rio Earth Summit, the pragmatic side, the politics. And then you have Boutros Ghali, the UN Secretary General, ending the conference by saying this, and this also reflects exactly what the NGO side said. I should like to conclude by saying that the spirit of Rio must create a new form of good citizenship, back to looking for that purpose, back to looking for that sense of meaning. Right. After loving his neighbor as the Bible required him to, post-Rio man must also love the world, including the flowers, birds, and trees, every part of that natural environment that we are constantly destroying. Over and above the moral contract with God, over and above the social contract concluded with men, we must now conclude an ethical and political contract with nature, with this earth to which we owe our very existence and which gives us life. To the ancients, and this goes back down to the question of statue deities on our buildings. To the ancients, the Nile was a god to be venerated, as was the Rhine an infinite source of European myths, or the Amazonian forest, the mother of forests. Throughout the world, nature was the abode of the divinities that gave the forest, the desert, or the mountains a personality which commanded worship and respect. Right. The earth had a soul. To find that soul again, to give it new life, that is the essence of Rio. And that is the essence of Re-Enchantment.
See, this is important, and what most people miss about the UN, I mean, they look at it as this evil one world government, which ultimately it will be, but they miss something really important, and that is one of the framers of the Parliament of the World's Religions was George Muller. Now, was he at all attached with the UN? I know the answer. I'll let you say it.
Yes.
Yes. He was the Secretary General of the UN.
Yes, right. Robert Mueller.
Right, Robert Mueller. And he came to this realization that if you really wanted a one world government, what did you need?
One world religion.
A one world spirituality, not a religion, a one world spirituality. Initially, he kind of wanted a one world religion, and the first one they had in 1993 that we were at, they issued something called the Global Ethic, which was really saying, okay, all you religions, you need to sort of lay down your arms and all join in arm in arm with the religion we're giving you. It didn't go well. And so by the next one, they had reformatted that to say, look, we're going to recognize all of your religious rituals and traditions as long as we can all agree that there really is only one God, oneness, let's say.
Or unity.
And we just all approach it from different vantage points. So Richard Rohr would name that perennialism. I would name it perennialism as well, that all religions have the core truth about God in the center of their views. They're not really in conflict. They just think they are. So, how does that work then? We have another quote here from your book. I had warned Carl in advance I was going to do this because I think they're important. Israeli scholar Ezekiel Kaufman explained that the biblical theme of monotheism points to a deity who is the source of all being, not subject to a cosmic order and not emergent from a pre-existing realm, a God free of limitations of magic and mythology. Now, in light of the concept you're explaining that everything is one, you've got oneism, or monism would be the theological explanation of that. Why is this statement important?
Because the God that we see as revealed in Scripture demonstrates himself to be different than natural processes. He demonstrates himself to be different than the cosmic order. He is not the same as the material universe. Not only is he not the same, but because he reveals himself as being unique, par excellence, there is no one like him, it destroys the concepts of oneness at its foundation. In other words, the God of the Bible reveals that there is value, there are proper judgments, there is moral right and wrong, because he himself is different than the created order. Whereas, of course, the concept of oneness is that at its essence, man, nature, and the deity, however you want to name the deity, they're all essentially the same. And so the biblical view is completely antagonistic to the heartbeat of myth, because the heartbeat of myth, understood this way, is about continuity, that there is essentially nothing different between man, nature, and the divine, whereas the biblical view is absolutely. It is completely different. And really, this is exactly where the clash takes us to. Something so simple. And I think in the church, we have missed the importance of this, demonstrating that the God we serve reveals himself to be completely different. He is utterly unique. That's the concept of holiness and being exalted.
So could we envision a church built on this new approach to religion as, maybe agreeing that I am the walrus would be in its hymnal? It's like, I am the egg. I am he as you are.
You are the Eggman. Cuckoo.
Actually, Ron, we can envision that. In my country, we have the United Church of Canada, which has been historically my nation's leading edge Protestant denomination. Right. And they have in their songbook a hymn to Gaia. They have in their songbook hymns to Mother Earth, and specifically a song entitled "Oh Beautiful Gaia."
Well, I mean, it's like I can see people singing, I am he as you are me, and we are all together. I don't know about the next part. See how they run like pigs from a gun. Well maybe with, with defunding the police, maybe that goes right. Yeah.
Ron, in a sense, many of us have sort of gone in that direction where doctrine is less important. And so you'll have, for example, we have a sponsor that has a product to talk about Joel Osteen and his foray into this idea of no real truth.
It is very, because it's all about success, right? So are you still trying to figure out how to clean up in the ministry business? Do you want to finally learn how to get to the bottom of growing a successful church? Would you like to flush away your failures and start having your best church now? Well, then you need Charlatan Ultra Soft, because nothing says theologically soft like Joel Osteen's Charlatan Ultra Soft. And by the way, even at this time of shortages, you will never have a shortage of this particular product because it's personally tested by the man himself. It provides comfort where it counts. It wipes away even the most stubborn orthodoxy, and it comes with a money-back guarantee. Keep those butts in the pews with Charlatan Ultra Soft, only at World's End Theology Outlet.
Yes.
So, I went to the supermarket yesterday and they were all out of this. People really want it.
People really want it. So
you better get a hold of it.
With Carl Teichrib. He's author of the book Game of Gods, and it is in our I even pointed in the right place in our description at the bottom of this, so you can order it. And I would say you want to get it. One of the quotes, and I'm going to go back to this because we're revisiting this theme of re-enchantment. That's our theme. How is it affecting culture? It is about narrative. That becomes the coin of communication, right?
The coin.
The coin of communication.
The medium of exchange, right?
Yeah. And so Carl writes this. although the role of ritual in relation to myth is important, it is the aspect of reality narrative we need to consider. In this way, myth serves as a tool to disseminate ideas, embed values, shape worldviews, and emotively, I like that, emotively, position grand themes as representing something sacred and unifying. Myth, understood as an information technology, takes upon itself a propaganda quality and becomes a powerful actor for social transformation. Wow, that's really true. So
today,
one of the things we see going on today, I'm dealing with in a couple of situations with Richard Rohrism, we'll call it, permeating Christian high schools. And when I was first contacted, I said, okay, here's something you probably need to look for. I have noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, that we have sort of two twins going hand in hand. They don't seem connected at first, but they seem to show up in the same place, and that is Richard Rohr and the Enneagram and critical race theory. And I thought about, why do they keep appearing in the same place? Because they're both based on narrative, not on fact. Is that how this propaganda tool operates?
Yes. And the important part of that is the emotional aspect, because then you feel like you are invested emotionally in it. You feel like you're invested within that narrative because it brings you definition. It brings you purpose. It gives you a sense of meaning. And now you feel that meaning. You feel that. You're energized by it. Ben Shapiro keeps saying facts don't care about your feelings. Right. He's right. But feelings rule the roost when it comes to developing narratives that then influence policy, that then change culture, that then change the values and the structures, even within your own churches. It's powerful.
Right.
You can't, it's a tide. It's really a tide that you can't stop. All you can do is hope to pull some who are sinking in it and pull them free of it and say, look, no, there is something that is true. And it's not attached to your feelings, and that is the word of God.
And we see this happening in a lot of areas. Now, Ron does counseling, so he runs into this in kind of those sessions. I have had to do somewhere. I'll meet with someone who is in a marital crisis, and one will say to me, well, I don't feel in love any longer. And then I have to step back and go,
Elementary School.
I understand that feelings are important to you. I do get that. But you made a commitment. And love is not necessarily a feeling, but is a following through on that commitment. Feelings may come or they may not, but feelings are more infatuation. When I met this beautiful young lady when I was but a teenager, I was infatuated with her. Largely because of how she made me feel about myself. Right?
Yeah.
Now, we married, and now, 50 years later, I'm still in love with her, but it is quite different and may involve how I feel about her at times, but it's bigger, it's commitment, it is carrying on certain, I don't know, ritual, if you will, that goes along with being married. I don't know if I'm explaining that clearly, but feelings are not
it's also history and bonding and all kinds of things that it's a deeper form of the same thing in a way, but it's also, for you as a Christian, it's informed by the biblical definition of love, which goes far beyond the things we've just described. So
right. But you make the point, though, feelings are important, and they are. But feelings don't determine what is true. They don't drive truth. Right. And in today's culture, and I in the chapter that we've been talking about on Re-Enchantment, I bring in what happened in Nazi Germany, which really was the propaganda tool of collective emotion. And I'm seeing that today. We still have that propaganda tool of collective emotion. Here's the narrative. This is the new meaning, the new purpose you have. It's not even now the new age. It's now the collective we, where our emotions are all collectivized, and we're rallying the masses. I'll give you here's a quote. This goes back to 1919. This was this is it's a powerful quote because it fits with what we're talking about. The great secret of the coming age of the world is that civilization rests not on reason but on emotion. It is clearly in evidence that the science of creating and transmitting public opinion under the influence of collective emotion is about to become the principal science of civilization, to the mastery of which all governments and all powerful interests will in the future address themselves, and with every resource at their command. Yep, it happened in the 1930s in Germany. It continually is used. We're constantly calling up, we need a new way forward. We are the change. Be the change. Whatever.
Hope and change.
Hope and change.
No spare change. Yeah.
That's right. There's always there's always a declaration or a call to action, and we've already been emotionally invested within that, and it moves us forward. We don't think. We don't have to think. Just charge.
Right. Yep.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to think. Just charge. Just feel it and engage in it and carry it out. One of the things you point out kind of about this is one contributor. You're talking about the Club of Rome and how we need to reshape ideas. One contributor emphasized the creation of overarching social narratives. New images or myths are needed that will be able to act as guiding images of social change. Now, when was that?
That was in the early 1970s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Club of Rome was like a real thing. For those conspiracy advocates, we can go, yeah, the Club of Rome was a real thing. And you're not just reading from afar from bits and pieces you picked up here and there. You've attended many of these kinds of meetings.
I've watched it firsthand. I've watched it firsthand on many occasions. Don, I know you've watched it firsthand at the Parliament of World Religions. I've seen it firsthand when I was at the United Nations back during the Millennium Forum, and then at the World Urban Forum in Vancouver, and numerous global governance forums. I've seen it firsthand. Golly, where you really see it firsthand in a significant way, a place where politics and spirituality and meaning and purpose and re-enchantment and the earth all come together. When I go to Burning Man. Burning Man really is a place where all of this is catalyzed in one spot.
How many times have you been to Burning Man?
A few times, three times in the desert, and then to regionals. And I guess this year, because this year, 2020, it was canceled, but it all went virtual, which was fairly interesting. So I logged, I think, 50 or 60 hours in an Oculus, interacting with people in the virtual Burning Man. Kind of wild. But here's an example, though. In 2017, I went to Center Camp, and Reverend Billy, a very famous individual within the Burning Man community, was giving his famous Sunday morning sermon. And he was telling all of us, science has failed us. Science and materialism has failed us. The God who claims to know everything, referring to the biblical God, we don't believe in him anymore either. That's failed us. What do we have left? All we have left are ourselves and the earth. All we have left is ourselves and the earth will look after us even in death. Can everybody say a big earth-alleluia? And then, of course, earth-alleluia! I'm standing back going, oh my stars. But, of course, what else is left?
Right.
If you've tossed out Christianity, the God who reveals himself, if you've tossed out even materialism because it stripped the soul, what do you have left? Honestly, what you have left is a resurgence or a type of neo-paganism. That's why you could call all this, and it's being called this, as an ancient future worldview.
An ancient future worldview, which now I want to bring up a comment by Audrey. She says, you can sit in Center Camp all day and just watch everything being talked about in this interview play out.
Yes.
That is also true at the Parliament of the World's Religions. You can find a place and just watch all of this transpire before your very eyes.
Yes, and Audrey's been to both. Thanks, Audrey, for participating. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. I mean, you'll sit down at a table full of Wiccans from various Wiccan denominations. I mean, people are surprised when I tell them they actually have denominations. Yes, they have denominations. And you'll ask them, okay, what is Wicca? And they all have the same starting statement. Wicca for me is. And then they'll go on to describe it. You go, well, why do they do that? Because in Wicca, there is no absolute ultimate truth. There is only your truth, which may be in conflict with somebody else's truth. And that is the good thing about oneism, is we can all be right. The only thing you have to affirm is that all is one. So the one thing that is not allowed is the totalitarian, narrow-minded view called Christianity.
We've just replaced it with a different totalitarian, narrow-minded view.
Yes, absolutely, Ron. You nailed it.
Well, I put you saw my tweet today, didn't you? It's been getting a lot of attention. I didn't think it would. I wrote. Now I have to scroll down and find it. It's actually I didn't. It wasn't just a tweet. It was I put it on my Facebook page. Maybe it'll be easier to find it there. When people say "let's think outside the box,"
All right.
What they many of them really mean is let's think inside my box instead of yours. They make it sound so like let's free our minds. When you start, I'm always kind of put on edge when I hear people say let's think outside the box, because I know that 99% of the time these people already have another box they want me to jump into instead of the one that.
So I wondered, is that just like a boxing match, maybe?
Well, if it comes to that, then yeah. So, anyways.
All right. Now we're going to have to do a couple of things here because, unbeknownst to our friend Carl, Ron has to flee here in about 2 minutes. So we're going to do a couple of things because I want to carry on this conversation a few minutes more, if you don't mind. I know others are kind of chiming in, which is good. And that is this: we're going to have Ron do the walkout, and then we're going to have and after Ty, what do they call it? Still on the air theoretically, but
yeah, you can call it the outtakes.
The after the show. That's what Fox calls it, right? The after the show.
Yeah. The stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, but actually not included anyways. So yeah, you want me to do that right now, Don? I can do that if you want.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I hate to leave you guys early, but
well, then you can flee for your life whenever you want.
Flee, fly, flow. Okay, so let's do that. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Yvonne Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc., in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law. Never. But I shall leave you to your devices.
Okay.
Or somebody's devices. And
I'm going to let everyone know that we're going to continue talking in our quote after the show. I kind of like that.
After the show.
Yeah, I hope Fox doesn't sue me for that. We're talking with Carl about his book, Game of Gods. In particular, we're talking about chapter 7 of that book, and the link to it is in our description at the bottom of the under this here. We have Christopher Green in Calvary Chapel. It's called Afterglow. I like that. So we can do Afterglow.
And a B and a B and a B and a B. That's all, folks. I'll see you guys later.
Talking
Ron, good to
about
see you again.
climate change, global movement, the U.S. Is apparently under the new regime talking about going back and re-engaging in the climate, whatever it is that they're going to do. The climate concord. No, what is that? The climate, the Paris Accord.
Yes, Paris Accord. Yes. Oh, and by the way, Christine Figueres, who was the climate change coordinator for the Paris Accord, the one who basically wrote the Paris Accord. I don't know if you ran into her, Don.
I did not.
But she was at the Parliament of World Religions in 2018 giving talks.
Yeah. Well, there's somebody
there.
You have to kind of pick and choose. And me, I prefer to hang around with the Buddhists and the Wiccans if I can, but I do check some other stuff out. It was also a little surprising, and I should have put this together, but I didn't. Joy and I are very fascinated with Nazi Germany, Second World War, its impact on the planet, really, because it did have a huge impact on the planet. And how could people get so, I don't know, roped into false beliefs and therefore bad behavior? They kind of go together. False beliefs and bad behavior can go together. And you point out, and we knew that Hitler, for example, was a New Ager before New Ageism was popular. But you point out that Nazi Germany was the first green state.
Yes. And my friend Mark Musser does a great job with that in his book, Nazi Oaks. Before Nazi Germany instituted green policies, you can go back to Lenin and see Lenin putting in place nature preserves. But his perspective behind that was different. It was more of a pragmatic. Lenin had a more of a pragmatic angle to it, whereas Nazi Germany, especially under some of the thinking that emerged through Heinrich Himmler, that was certainly built on German Romanticism. It was built around a green theology, a green worldview in a significant way. Adolf Hitler was a really fascinating character in that when you read his speeches, when you read his table talks, his letters, that type of thing, he's actually more of a pragmatist in many respects. He definitely has a mystical, New Age, re-enchanted worldview, but he also is a hardcore, hardline, pragmatic politician. He's playing everybody's sides against each other.
Right.
Whereas when you take a look at Heinrich Himmler,
it's kind of interesting because if you study Hitler, one of the things you realize is he had an idea of where he wanted to get. He didn't really have necessarily a clue as to how to get there.
Right.
And so he played each one against the other by sort of floating out there, I would like to do X, whatever X is. And then he would watch all of his underlings wrestle with each other to come up with the idea that he would approve.
Yes. He was a pragmatist. Whereas Heinrich Himmler, second in command, he was a mystic through and through. Yeah. Total mystic. I write here, I've been told it's not cool to quote yourself. I don't care, I'm not cool. 3 national themes instilled mystery, myth, and meaning. Speaking about Nazi Germany. Führer, the leader messiah, who is absorbed into the fate of the people, a mystical incarnation of the national soul. Volk, the authentic and pure community, an ethnic spiritual identity in which the individual is consumed within the Germanic ideal. Blut and Boden, blood and soil, the life force which drives purpose, connecting the fluid of sacrifice and toil to the sacredness of the land. And of course, I say none of this immersion of vacuum. When you take a look, especially, and I deal with a little bit of this this is the problem, Don. I could have just jumped into this and made a whole other book on this aspect alone. Mark Musser, get his book, Nazi Oaks. He's done a fantastic job of doing that. But the one element of this conversation I think that's important was the role of Otto Rahn. Otto Rahn was Heinrich Himmler's mystic, okay? Heinrich Himmler got his cues, and a lot of it, his worldview cues from Otto Rahn and Otto Rahn's book, Lucifer's Court. I've read Otto Rahn's material. Interesting. He's a disturbed young man, there's no question. But here's a little section from Otto Rahn Again, this kind of fits with our theme of re-enchantment. In Lucifer's court, Ron recounts his wanderings in southern Germany. After stopping under an apple tree, he felt compelled to write the heretical thoughts of traveling spirits from centuries ago. Quote, Jesus is not Christ. Pardon me. Jesus is not Christ. What is God? Lucifer is nature as you see it in you, around you, above you. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then a scout patrol comes into view, and Ron joins in a song of solidarity, the group emotion, the collective ideal. If one of us becomes tired, the others are awake for him. If one of us wants to doubt, the others who believe laugh. If one of us is to fall, the others stand for two, because each fighter is a god, the comrades together.
Boy, and that really did predominate the whole Hitler era, the Third Reich era. It was very romanticized time. Women, of course, their big thing was you need to keep having babies so we can populate the new world order that we are creating. Very mythical sort of, even their parades, huge productions that they would have regularly to keep people engaged in the myth that they are purveying. That's important.
Right. And you're right. One part of that too, Don, and I just quickly interject something, is that kind of environment, let's call it the carnivalesque. The carnivalesque,
I like that, yeah.
Or you could call it communitas, the feeling of group emotion. You're all driven into this thing. You're feeling like one through the emotion of the group. All of this puts you in the position of a participant, not an observer.
Right.
And so that's when your boundaries dissolve. That's when your judgment starts to disappear. That's when your discernment begins to break down, because now you're a participant drawn in by the emotion of what you're feeling along with everybody else beside you. It's a powerful, powerful tool.
So as far as what we are seeing today, both in culture and in the church, I think what you just described helps us to understand a little better what's going on.
Right.
When you see, for example, hashtag BLM, which many think is just about we need to treat blacks differently and better. Okay, that's something we can discuss, but that isn't what they're doing. They're actually engaging in religious ritual. We wrote on that actually in one of our blogs, that they are engaging in religious ritual and narrative, where you see one of the women calling out the name of someone who died. What they're actually doing is calling on the spirit of that person to come and empower them and help them to do the work, the spiritual work that they are engaged in, which then results in crowds burning down buildings, looting, pillaging, and even maiming and killing people in the process as a group. And they somehow feel justified by doing that. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about? Is that really any different than we saw in the romanticism of the Third Reich?
It fits. It does fit. You can't really divorce it. It does fit. We have to be honest about this too. We see this within Christian circles as well.
Yes.
One of the examples for myself was at the 2015 Parliament. I went to a workshop asking the question, are we all one? And the moderator of the workshop said, hey, can you shout out or give in a short sentence, your aha moment within your religious experience? Of course, the room's full of everybody, Buddhists, Wiccans,
right.
Christians, Muslims, and they're all shouting out the same things. And then it was, I believe, Philip Goldberg, who was doing the moderating, said, look at, essentially I'm paraphrasing, look at, you're all saying the same thing. See, it's not about your doctrines or dogmas, it's what you feel.
Right. And that was led by someone who supposedly is a Christian.
Yeah. So I mean,
that workshop, right?
Yeah. And then within the realm of the Christian church, I see this as well. I've been in services. I know, Don, you have. Probably most people in our audience have been in services where we walk away going, wow, I felt God moving.
Right.
Really? Did we? or are we having a neurochemical experience that now we're attaching a spiritual meaning to? I'm not saying don't allow your emotions to be a part of it, because they are. Don't allow your emotions to determine what is true.
Well, yeah. And in fact, my pastor sometimes chides me because I tend to be, pretty facts, figures, analysis, what's going on, what's being taught, examining doctrine. But every once in a while, like in a worship time, I just feel overcome and might even begin weeping. And he's surprised by that. Well, I think loving God sometimes includes an emotional experience.
Oh, absolutely.
But it isn't the way by which I determine what is true. That comes from his word. He tells me what is true. And we see this happening in outside the church, as you point out. Critical race theory, that's another way. The Enneagram is really feeding this narrative in a big way. Why? Because it's pointing you back to yourself. It's becoming enchanted with you, right? It is saying, here's the true story. The true narrative is you never sinned. You have always been with God. And in fact, you're Christed, just like Jesus became Christed. And why is that? Well, because the universe is the first incarnation of Christ. You are part of the universe and therefore part of Christ already. You are one. So now we're back to oneness again. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, we can't get away from that because it is the dominant worldview. It's the worldview, obviously, of occult and esoteric beliefs, but it's the worldview of the countercults. It's the worldview of major religions. Honestly, it's the worldview of secularism, secular humanism, because it ultimately says that man is the measure of all things.
Right.
Well, at that point, man is the center of the universe. It's all there is. We're all evolving. If you want to take a secular spiritual approach to it, we're all evolving into the cosmic one, whether you call that, a secular or a mystical epiphany, but it still is all the same thing. It's all this claim that creation is divine. That's really what the claim is, which is nothing more than the claim of Genesis chapter 3,
right?
That you can be divine. And here's a special knowledge that will get you there.
Right. And then we have also in Genesis a story which we refer to as the Tower of Babel story. Now, just as a refresher, what was going on there? Because I want to draw that out to where we're at today.
Well, you have the world all coming together as one, with one purpose, with one desire. They all have one language. They build a tower and a city. We forget that. It has a city structure to it. There's a tower and a city. And in essence, it is building their own utopia without God.
Right.
It is the act of idolatry in that the works of their hands will save them. And it's the works of their hands in unison.
Right.
It is done together. They're making a name for themselves lest they be scattered.
A name for themselves lest they be scattered. So if we look at that and go, okay, what do we see going on today? Isn't that pretty much the same thing?
It is. Don, we have been living under the shadow of the Tower of Babel for millennium. We can't escape that shadow. It's there. In fact, even our architecture, one of the chapters I deal with the question of cosmopolis, because that's a huge, huge issue. Cosmopolis. And it's a fancy sounding phrase, but all that cosmopolis ultimately is the collective community of all living things. Ironically, I think it was at the 2018 Parliament. I went to a workshop on cosmopolis and re-enchantment. It was led by a Wiccan, talking about how ultimately cosmopolis will be realized when all of the spirits of nature and all of humanity recognizes their oneness with each other. And then we can build the true city of man, the true cosmopolis.
The true cosmopolis. So we have the United Nations trying to create a one world government, which includes a one world religion. The Parliament of the World's Religions is working. I don't think they've been accepted yet to do this, but they are trying to become the affiliated with the UN to be the religious ambassadors for the world, isn't that?
That's what it seems to be doing. That's where it seems to be going.
Well, we know that's what they're trying
Yep,
to do.
and
I didn't
that's
know
right.
if that had
That's right.
become official yet.
Not yet.
In fact, I have pictures of their new designer outfits that they all created for their religious garb, for the religious ambassadors of the world. So we have that. And then we have the need for a one world economic system. How does that play into this whole idea? And if so, how and why? Let's take about just under a minute to do that.
Sure. Wow, that's an interesting segue.
Yeah.
Okay. At the 2000, this is going to take me back to the desert. All right, I have to take us back to a little road trip to the desert. And Audrey, if she's still listening, she wasn't part of that, but because that was in 2018 at Burning Man. Okay, cool. At the 2018 Burn, I went to a workshop on cryptocurrencies, psychedelics, and spirituality. And it was led by, and Audrey knows who it is, one of the main gurus in the cryptocurrency space. He is a former Disney star, and he had just come back from a multi-day spiritual experience. I believe it was an ayahuasca encounter. And he had new information given to him. And so he's there representing where technology and cryptocurrencies are going. And he lays out in the space of about 2 hours 4 building blocks for what he considered to be the new civilization. I'm just paraphrasing because, I mean, he explained all this in depth and he had to tie it all together, but it would tie together like this. First, you need a new building block that would be spiritual in nature, out with the old Judeo-Christian framework, in with a psychedelic, Eastern, mystical, feminist form of spirituality. It is definitely psychedelic.
Right.
It is that experience of oneness. The second building block is a new social contract, a new social contract with new values, new norms, new ways even of doing family. And he explained that's basically what everybody is doing at Burning Man. And that's true. And Burning Man, by the way, is just one facet of this entire, it's a global phenomena, a cultural phenomena of transformation. But it's one of the motherships of that movement. And so he recognized that's block 1 and block 2. Block 3 would have to be a global digital currency, some way of bringing about an economic and governance model into the equation so that your behaviors would exemplify block 1 and block 2 by how you purchased and how you engaged in economic activity.
And they will have access to that knowledge.
Sure.
By virtue of being digital.
Because of your purchasing history.
Right.
The fourth building block to tie all this together, how do you manage this at the international level? How do you manage this at the planetary level? Artificial intelligence. Don, I walked away from that one. That was, for me, a moment where everything came together at once. And I walked away from there with my jaw probably dragging 50 feet behind me from what I had just heard, because I'm like, golly, here's your game plan. Will it come out exactly like this? Probably not. But boy, it all comes together really well, doesn't it?
Right. Well, it's going to be interesting for us here in the U.S. and because I'm in contact with people from around the globe these days. We have other nations, our friends in the UK and South Africa and even Australia going, we're very concerned because what happens there impacts all of us on a worldwide basis. And they are very concerned about what they see going on politically today, especially because it seems to be the way that the one world government can come together. Up until now, whether you like Donald Trump or didn't like Donald Trump, he was preventing this from happening. The cast of characters who are now engaged in running or will be engaged in running a government seem to be all in to the global reset. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yep.
Carl, as always, it's been great having you. We will revisit this again in the future. Not sure when, but everyone, you want to pick up his book, Game of Gods. The link is in the description. Get it, read it. You won't do it in a night. It's going to be a little bit of a read, but it is a worthwhile read. So everyone else, see you all later.